Hello everyone, welcome to Perth Museum. We're in the museum to film our contribution to the favourite objects section of the conference. And the favourite objects I've chosen, actually three rather than one, but they're all interconnected and they're all in this case here. And we're calling our segment Rituals of Memory and Intoxication, the Abercairnie Cauldron in Context. The three objects are the cauldron itself, and then we have a Roman military saucepan or skillet and a Celtic armlet. The Roman saucepan or skillet is of copper alloy. It isn't quite complete and it dates to the 1st century CE. It has a stamp on its handle naming Scipius Polybius as the maker, and that tells us it came from the workshops in southern Italy of that particular maker. He seems to have made most of his product for the Roman military, and examples of his work are known from across the empire. The latter part of its life it seems to have spent at Cardine Roman fort at Meagle, and then after that it's made its way into Caledonian hands, and it turns up in the late 18th century when it's dredged from Stormont Loch near Cooperangus. So it was obviously valued by the Caledonians. They repaired it and ultimately then possibly offered it to the watery loch as a votive offering. The Celtic armlet, just to its right, is what's known as the massive style armlet, and you can see how it gets its name. It is a massive thing, and we'll come back to the weight of that later on. So it's made of bronze, and it has two terminals with red and yellow enamel insets, and they're in a cruciform design. And behind those two objects we have the magnificent Abercairnie cauldron itself. It's beaten out of a single sheet of bronze, and if we look in detail at both the inner and the outer surface, we can see the punch marks that were used in that process. It's not quite complete. There's a set of rivet holes around the rim which would have held a rim strengthening piece, probably of iron rather than bronze, and it would have also had two opposed iron handles which are missing. It was clearly cherished and had a sustained life because there's evidence of patching on the body of the cauldron. Cauldrons were really important in Iron Age British society, and they held a range of meanings: practical, symbolic and mythic, and that range of meanings they shared with cauldrons across the European and Mediterranean worlds. In essence, what you would use cauldrons for would be to prepare and serve a range of liquids for drinking, wine and ale and blood in a sacrificial context, and food for consumption. Meats which could be both stewed or boiled in a cauldron and then consumed afterwards. So the presence of magnificent vessels like this at communal feasts and at ritual sacrifices is probably how their more symbolic and mythic meanings arose, because they were those constant witnesses to those processes. What's worth saying is that in terms of the end of life of these objects, we can link them to kind of wetland landscapes or wetscapes, if you like. So they share both a broad chronology from the early years of the first millennium CE to cultural context, and as I say, to that end of life wetland context. And two of them in particular, the cauldron and the armlet, may in fact relate to the same wet landscape, and that's where we're going now. And here we are, we've landed by the side of a minor road that goes down into Muthil, and we're standing on a prominent ridge, and over in this direction behind me, the eagle-eyed will spot telegraph wires and also a telegraph pole almost directly behind me, and that's where in the mid-19th century, during agricultural work, the pair of armlets were found, and that land belonged to Pitcolony Farm. The armlets, which you will have noticed when we looked at them in the museum, have a semi-coiled construction, and each weighs at least 3.5 pounds. So they're quite heavy things to actually wear by a person, which has led to the suggestion that they might have adorned a wooden statue, a deity type figure maybe, perhaps one that was a guardian or protector of this this wet landscape. I know it doesn't look wet here because we're on this ridge, but from there you would look down onto that wet landscape, which today is dominated by the Machany water, which feeds into the River Erne over here, and that's the dominant system here, the Erne, and it's very sluggish and it's very boggy, or historically was. So the other aspect of that wet landscape or wetscape is off to the northeast from here. If we went about 7 miles across the River Erne and around about the course of one of its major tributaries, the Pow, which was very sluggish and boggy in the past and has been canalised since the 19th century. And Abercairny is about 7 miles in that direction, and somewhere in the boggy ground of the Abercairny estate, the cauldron was found. It's quite a common location for a cauldron to be found. They're quite frequently found in rivers, in bogs, in wet places, and that tends to indicate that they may be being made as offerings to the supernatural realm, to implore some kind of protection or aid from the gods or other supernatural forces. This also becomes, when the Romans arrive, the first frontier zone of the attempted Roman occupation in the first century of the first millennium CE, and there's lots of military structures in that direction, and the gas bridge proper is over there. So there would have been plenty of those saucepans we saw in the museum, and like that one, possibly they were reused, or some of them were reused with cauldrons to serve whatever contents of the cauldron, whether it was liquid or food, into cups and bowls and drinking vessels.